Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to this ASATA live webinar. My name is Natalia and I'll be moderating today if my technology cooperates. At the moment my internet is misbehaving, as I'm sure others are as well. We're talking all things UIF today, and with us we have a familiar face, Fatima van Toorn from FET Consulting, and our legal eagle Elizabeth de Stadler. Also in the room is Fatima's colleague Suzanne, and of course you have ASATA CEO Otto de Frisch in the room as well. Thanks to all of you who have submitted your questions by email. We were absolutely inundated, and we're going to do our best to cluster those into themes and respond for the benefit of many. If I could also ask you to keep an ear out for the general answers that will respond to your specific questions. We only have an hour and a half with Fatima and Elizabeth today, and I'd like to give you as much value as possible. Before we begin, this is certainly uncharted territory. Like many of you, I'm looking for certainty and for answers that are concrete. Unfortunately, as you'll have noticed these past few months, certainty just isn't something that exists. And the trick is actually to figure out how to make a decision and how to move forward, despite the fact that we don't know what's going on. So none of us in the room here have all the answers for you, but what we will do is tell you what we would do if we were you. We will also be taking questions during today's session, so please place those in the Q&A folder below. Type your question in and it will come through to me. I'm also going to leave the chat open, so if you'd like to let us know where you're connecting from now, you can do so by clicking on the chat button. Finally, we are recording the webinar and we will release it to everyone who did register, as well as all ASATA members. Please give us a day or two to get that out. We will send it out, I absolutely promise. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Otto for a brief welcome. Otto, floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. And Matthew Fubbs, thank you. It's not a hat. It's a nice piece of art. I thought I'd mix things up with my background for today. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. As Nat's alluded, these are unprecedented times, and as part of the broader leadership of the travel and tourism sector in South Africa, I can tell you that we are doing our level best to try to make sense of the very many and complex and diverse challenges that are being presented to us through the various mediums that we need to engage on your behalf. Whether that is the South African government, the various ministries that impact and affect us, through to ongoing challenges with the aviation sector through IATA. Believe me, we are living this with you guys on a daily basis, and if we look sometimes a little bit worn and tired, it's because just like you, we are really battling to often make sense of the diverse and constant nature of the changes that seems to be coming at us. At least today, we were surprised with something positive in that the announcement yesterday was that they were going to be extending the TERS payments. Whilst a little surprising that it's up until the middle of next month, we will accept the fact that there's an opportunity to access some financial support for your businesses for the following 6 weeks at least. So we are certainly encouraged by that, but to show you sometimes how off guard we are, despite the fact that our membership of the Tourism Business Council, of which I represent you all as one of their board members, none of us who have been actively working with them to identify and try to motivate and lobby for the extension of TERS had any idea that this was going to happen. So a nice surprise for once, and I'll take that. And guys, look, I want to obviously maximize the time that you have with our experts today. I know there have been a multitude of questions. Some of them have probably been dealt with by virtue of the fact that TERS is back. But there are also a number of uncertainties regarding UIF. And so beyond TERS, we have to be thinking about how and what you and your staff have the right and access to as contributors to the UIF. And they'll certainly touch on that today as well. So without further ado, thank you all and good luck. We are continuing to do our level best to support you through this. Before I hand over to Elizabeth, just a small reminder that we have notified you all of a date reminder, save the date for the ASATA Travel Summit. It is a webinar-based summit that will be running over 3 days during the middle of August, so the 12th, 13th, and 14th of August. We are finalizing the program, but it is focusing on reimagining the travel team. that we will be hosting over those 3 days, and that you will get value and benefit as you look at what the future of the industry and your businesses may look like. For ASATA members, we are offering these webinars at no charge, and for non-ASATA members, there will be a fee of 500 Rand, and for that 500 Rand, you will have access to all of the various sessions that we'll be hosting over those 3 days. So keep boxes program over the next couple of days. The ASATA General Counsel, Elizabeth de Stadler of Novation, and she will facilitate today's the sessions. Thank you.
Thanks, Arthur and Natalia. I think there have been enough introductions, so I'm going to launch right into it with Fatima and Suzanne. Just from my side as well, thank you for joining us again. I'm very glad that you haven't tired of our hundreds of questions yet. Just to emphasize again what Nat's also said is keep the questions coming in the Q&A. How I'm going to deal with this is we're going to address just some general themes that came out in the questions that you guys have been submitting for purposes of this webinar, as well as just in the last several months. So we're going to touch on those general themes now, and then we will go into the specific questions after that. So just keep an ear out. So a lot of your questions will be answered during the general discussion, but I will certainly repose some of those questions. For a lot of us, this is uncharted territory, and some things bear repeating. Right, so Arthur referred to it. There was a big announcement yesterday that TERS is going to be extended until the 15th of August. In preparation for the session, read through the statement by the Labour Ministry, which stated that the criteria is going to stay the same. I thought if we could start, Fatima, just with a bit of a recap on what you can claim from TERS, how it works. We've had loads of questions about whether people who earn on commission qualify. Can people still submit their applications for April, May, and June? So if you can just do a general recap of what TERS is about and how to go about claiming from it, I think that is a good place to start.
Great. Right. Well, thank you everybody firstly for the invite to address you all again today. It's an absolute pleasure. And I'm very glad to have Suzanne on the panel as well. Suzanne has been assisting so many of our clients to actually claim benefits. So at least she's, from a practical perspective, will be able to answer some of those questions too. So thank you, Suzanne, for joining us too. So in terms of a recap, those members who haven't yet applied for the official TERS period, which was from the 27th of March, you better get your act together and do it now, because there is threats that they're going to close the window for April, May, and June. So those people that didn't yet apply for the period 27th of March until 30th of April, and then again from 1st of May until the end of May, and again for the period of June, suggest you get that going soon, because there's, as I said, threats that that's not going to be available anymore. June has only recently opened, because you might have heard of there were security breaches with UIF, so there's been a delay. But most companies that we know of have been paid for April and May at least. June is still outstanding for a lot of companies. So those of you might already, I think one of the questions was why people are waiting so long. The turnaround time is generally at least 2 weeks. So if you've only recently applied for the June window, don't be impatient, it will come through. Just another part of the recapping is nothing has changed in terms of the eligibility. So in other words, if you've got staff on reduced work time, if you've got people on temporary layoffs, if you've got people just earning less salaries, in other words, they are working, but they've taken a massive reduction in pay or even a small reduction in pay, you are allowed to claim. And even if it's just reduced income streams, we've got companies where people are working, but there's 90% of the income is not coming in. So the poor shareholders or owners are digging into their own pockets to pay people. That's also a reasonable justification to apply for TERS. So to repeat, it's reduced work time, temporary layoff, reduction in salaries, and just reduction in income streams. In other words, the employer could prove that they are maybe advancing people money out of their own pockets, but it's not coming from the business. There's no income in the business, and which I'm sure is applicable to all your members. In terms of what else do you want me to cover at the moment on the TERS? If that's just enough of a recap. I think that, sorry, the last thing, Elizabeth, the benefit is also not changed. It's still going to be 38 to 60% of salary up to that threshold of 17,719. And as we all know by now, the maximum is 6,730 through TERS, and the minimum is 3,500. After 15th of August, when people start having to claim for further benefits from UIF, we can't guarantee that the minimum will then be 3,500. So the maximum should still be 6,730, but the minimum might be less than 3,500. It was just for TERS that the minimum was set as 3,500. But do you want me to discuss after 15th of August now, or should we address that later?
No, I've got a couple of very specific questions that I want to ask you just about TERS, and I see that there are more questions like this coming in. A lot of people are complaining that there's an absolute sort of smorgasbord of problems that they are having with TERS, from certain employees not being paid without there being any apparent reason. We know that we've had a number of questions where foreign nationals are struggling to get their money out of TERS despite having contributed to the fund in the past. And I see there are also issues that relate to, for instance, the system saying that information is incorrect when in fact the information submitted has been correct. How do people go about escalating these issues?
Okay, well, let's start with the foreign nationals. It is true that the poor foreign national payments have been delayed, and we've heard that across businesses, so it's not just in your industry. And we know that at the same time that some foreign nationals have in fact been paid. So those of you who've got foreign nationals, don't give up. Don't think that foreign nationals are not entitled to TERS payments. They certainly are, especially if they have been contributing UIF. So the way to escalate it, we do have an email address which Suzanne can also post later on to all of you. It's the email address, it's called COVID-19 TERS support at labour.gov.za. So I'll repeat, COVID-19 TERS support, as in TERS support, one word, at labour.gov.za. So the idea is to first send an email to that address, and I'm specifically talking about your foreign nationals. Send 3 months of pay slips to prove that they're obviously contributing to UIF, and then basically the passport. And also a cover letter would be a good idea. One of our clients did that, and it seemed to help escalate the problem. With a cover letter saying they have been contributing, here's their passport, here's 3 months of proof that they've been paid, or at least salary slips, and then the declaration, in other words, the UIF declarations, which should come out of the payroll system that you're using, or at least then a manual list of the UIF declarations. And you email it to that COVID-19 TERS support email address, and then you should get your foreign nationals paid. In terms of all other problems, we have seen some of the questions that phoning the TERS hotline is like, I think one of your members said, trying to get a trip to Mars or something like that. It's you're not going to easily get through, but keep trying, and also use that same email address we've just said now to escalate queries. But to go back to your question about people not being paid, or we've had companies being told that there's duplication, or somebody's already got a UIF submission already active. In other words, somebody could have been on maternity leave and now the company is applying for TERS. Sometimes it will just say employee not registered, which then means that they haven't received the UIF declarations. So there's obviously very often reason codes why your staff haven't been paid. And as a service to ASATA, Suzanne is an absolute boffin at looking at the queries and addressing the queries. And we've also got a few of our other associates who are quite familiar now already with the reasons for non-payments on the system when it says not processed, and they normally give reasons. So if we need to, Suzanne and some of our associates can quickly help yourselves, but we would need your login details. So as a service to ASATA, we can certainly try and help you. It's not a big job to quickly go online and see what the reason codes are and then tell the company what is missing. Very often it's UIF declarations. Very, very often. Sorry, Suzanne, I'll let you come in now. Most companies have had problems with UIF declarations. They did not know that just paying over the UIF monthly amounts and the pay-as-you-earn monthly amounts suffice. So a lot of employers have failed to submit the UIF declarations, which is basically a printout from your payroll system. But Suzanne, sorry, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, so I just want to say I'll share my email address, but what I've been doing often with clients or non-clients is it is very easy for me to just log in and take a quick look. In terms of the foreign nationals, I just wanted to add to what Fatima was saying. If you have emailed the COVID-19 TERS support, it is normal if you haven't received a reaction yet. They do take very long. What we have seen is that we have had some success with registering the foreign nationals on U-filing as well, because what you need to remember is U-filing is automatic, so UIF will then much quicker pick up on the foreign nationals, so that definitely is the best course of action. The same for declarations. If your declarations are not up to date and you have been rejected due to that, it's always better to go via U-filing than go via the email address, unfortunately, because I think they do receive absolute magnitude of emails. Yeah, but by all means, pop me an email and I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
There's another TERS complication that we're getting quite a few questions on. So I'm just going to read this one question, but it relates to a couple of the questions that have been submitted. So it says, the news of threats to close submission for April to June is rather concerning for us. I've submitted for April on the 2nd of June and our application is still being processed. And as a result, we cannot submit for May and onwards because they require some sort of proof for the April period. Is this still the case? And is there anything more we can do besides wait for the April application to be approved?
Yeah, we've seen that problem. But Suzanne, you can answer it because I know you've just given advice on that.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are very concerned with regards to that as well. I think my current hope is that they mentioned they are considering to close that window at the end of July. I'm hoping that they won't, but we'll have to see. The only, what we are trying now, and what I would suggest is, I understand that you can't move on to the next month until you've submitted proof of payment for the previous month, and that's where the problem comes in. However, my sort of suggestion is to write a letter to explain that this is the situation and then upload the letter where you need to upload the proof of payment, because all they require is the actual upload, and once you've uploaded, you can move on to the next window. So
you could really upload anything.
Just say that again, Elizabeth.
I was going to say, so you could actually just upload anything there.
Yes, correct. So, needless to say, this is not advice that we received from a UIF commissioner. But this is my suggestion, and that's the only thing that I can think of doing, because we are indeed, you're 100% correct. We don't want people to not be able to apply because they've now closed the windows.
Okay, so let me just repeat that. So one of the practical strategies, and I emphasize that this is a strategy and a little bit untested, is if you can't proceed to upload your claims for May, June, July, because the previous month hasn't been paid, explain the situation in a letter, and then you upload the letter where you would normally upload the proof of payment. Did I paraphrase that correctly? Because yes. I think that this is a very important point. It would be a pity if people lose the opportunity to claim when this period closes. Okay.
Just on that note, the proof of payments, we know some companies have actually submitted either the pay slips itself or the EFT list, you know, the sort of EFT list, transaction list, so anything would go. So even if a company's advanced staff, you know, whilst waiting for payments, you know, even that would be probably done by EFT. So an EFT listing would also suffice, especially companies that actually pay people in advance whilst waiting for the payments to come into their bank account. That will also suffice.
Elizabeth, I saw one of the members said that he has done it that way and it worked fine and payments were processed.
Great.
Right. So I think let's make a big note that we publicize that advice, because I think that's really valuable. Thanks for sharing that. I want to encourage other people, if you have had success, you know, success stories or solved some of the problems that other people on the webinar are having, please post those. You know, we learn a lot from each other. One of the queries, and I suspect that this is for you, Suzanne, because this is probably one of those error messages that people get, seems to be that there are problems where you upload your company registration number or a bank account and the verification fails. And this seems to be a question that we're getting at least 10 times. What do you do in those instances? And obviously, you know, this is where the registration and the bank account details are in fact correct. What do you do then?
Yeah, so this has been a very recent development. So they only very recently, I think it was about a week ago, that they started asking for the business registration number. I also have clients who are seeing the same now, where they get a pop-up saying there's something wrong. I advise them, obviously, firstly to check. What they can also, they must just be very careful about the banking details, use the universal banking code. And then what we are thinking is that it might have to do with the information that the bank has on their side with regards to the business account. So what I'm suggesting, is that employers phone their banks just to make sure that the information that the bank has with regards to the business account corresponds with the information that they've put on TERS. I think, if I need to also sort of take a wild guess, is that if it still doesn't work, then very likely if you phone the hotline, they will say you need to escalate that query also via email to the COVID-19 TERS support email address. I really hope one can solve the problem, because needless to say, it does take a while if you have to escalate via email.
Okay, then another area, if I can group it like that, that we seem to be getting quite a few questions relating to is when they get a response that says the employees are not registered for UIF, but despite there being obviously completed UI19 forms, etc. So what is the next step there?
Okay, so I think if I understand correctly, when you get your payment breakdown report, the error code would then say the employee is not declared by the employer. And then that relates to what Fatima mentioned with regards to the monthly declaration. So firstly, just make sure that you have declared with the Department of Labor on a monthly basis. So not the payment to SARS, that's only one part of it. Have you declared on a monthly basis? If you have not, then the best way is to go and register your staff on U-filing, because if you then put in the correct starting date, then automatically those declarations get backdated, and then staff are very often paid. People can also email their declarations if they did it manually. That email address, and I'll share everything afterwards, that's going to be easier, I think, but needs to go to UIF declarations at labor.gov.za. But many employers must just check if they have a payroll system. Then very often you can actually do those declarations on a monthly basis automatically. So that's something to check. But this is a big problem. It's a very regular problem.
Yeah, it now rings a bell with one of my companies. We also thought we've been paying UIF and everything's sorted, and then it turned out that we didn't have the number, the Department of Labor number, and we had to rectify that first. So I suspect, guys, that a lot of the times when you are getting that message back, your employee hasn't been registered, but you know that you've been paying UIF, that is the problem, and that you should then register those employees on U-filing, and put in the correct start date, so that the system will then process the claims correctly.
Yeah, the problem is the Department of Labor needs to be able to pick up on the employees, not SARS. So hopefully sometime in the future they can connect, but currently that is not the case.
Right. So I'm continuing to scan, if there are more questions that relates to TERS, I'm going to, we'll mop them up at the end of the session, but so keep them coming. I'm going to move on for a moment because there are also a lot of questions about what's going to happen after TERS. So as Otto mentioned, we've been granted a very small reprieve of 6 weeks with this extension, oddly to the middle of a month. So how that's going to work, no one knows. And so understandably, a lot of you are thinking, into the future. So what happens on the 16th of August, because let's face it, as an industry, our problems are not going to go away. Unfortunately, the travel sector is probably going to be one of the last industries to recover and for things to return to some semblance of normal. So maybe we can just talk a little bit about UIF and some of the questions that we were getting up until yesterday, when TERS was gonna end sooner. And maybe let's just start again with the basics, right? So there's been a lot of I don't know if it's misinformation or just honestly uncertainty about what you can claim from UIF post-TERS. So maybe let's start there. So what claims are possible under UIF once TERS ends?
Okay, right, well, I can address that. So again, employees will be able to claim for reduced work time, for temporary layoffs. And obviously, if they've been retrenched and all the other normal reason codes, whether they were dismissed or went on maternity leave, so anything, so the normal UIF will be available from the 15th or 16th of August. In other words, everything that there used to be is still there, but of course now the reduced work time and the temporary layoff. So it's important that companies make sure that they use the correct UR19 form, because the UR19 form was amended when TERS started, and it's got code 17, which is the code to be used for reduced work time or temporary layoff. There isn't a temporary layoff code, it's only a code 17, which is called reduced work time. So if the main reason why members can't pay people after the 15th of August is either because they're on reduced work time or temporary layoff, then you use code 17. Obviously, if they're going to be retrenchments, then you'd use the UR19 code for either voluntary retrenchment or involuntary retrenchment. There's two different codes there. Obviously, if someone gets dismissed or goes on maternity leave, then you'd use those codes. So in terms of the benefit, we must remember that TERS was not linked to an employee's credits. So in other words, we could actually assure staff up until now that as long as the company was has registered them for UIF and they were contributing UIF, and remember, commission earners are not entitled to the TERS benefit. We're talking of people that earn a salary and pay UIF on a salary. Those people are all eligible for UIF, and it's not linked to individual credits. So the bummer now comes after the 15th of August. You as employers cannot guarantee your staff for how long they're going to be able to claim and how much they're going to get. We know that the formula is still going to be the same. In other words, that 38 to 60% that's regulated in the UI Act, that's not going to change. The threshold of 17,719 is not going to change. So you can tell your staff that those of you that are eligible to get UIF benefits after the 15th of August, again, we can know that you're not going to get more than 6,730, but the minimum might be less than 3,500, because it was only for TERS that 3,500 was guaranteed as the absolute minimum. But with UIF, there is no guarantee that the person would get a minimum of 3,500. So in terms of credits, that's now the confusing part, is that what is regulated, there was actually something called the Easy Aid for UIF COVID-19 Benefits 7. It was a PDF document we received from the Department of Labor quite a while ago. And in there, under point 8, and I'm looking at my other screen, so forgive my eyes going there, that's where we could actually share that again with you, where it's regulated that the employee will be able to claim for a maximum period of 365 days, which is a year. So to answer your employees, yes, there's a chance that you can claim for a year after the 15th of August, but it is dependent on employee credits. So what you as the employers can't guarantee is you don't know how many credits your employees have. You will never have that information. That's sitting with the UIF department. So it's basically worked out on the number of claims the employee has had in the past, in the last 4 years. If someone's been on maternity leave or joined your business 2 years ago and they were retrenched before coming to you and they've claimed for 4 or 5 months, we can't guarantee them that they're going to be able to still be eligible for a year. But for those of you that think, well, if the industry resurrects itself by December this year, by the time we get to level 1, hopefully, then we are hoping that all your employees will have enough UIF credits to be able to claim between the middle of August and by the end of the year. Okay. So hopefully that's going to be at least. But remember, now it's linked to credits, so we cannot guarantee your employees how much they're going to get, because it's absolutely linked to their own personal credits.
Just to be clear, I mean, does not apply for claims that were made under TERS, right? Because that was one of the main things about TERS, is that it wouldn't deplete your credits if you claimed under it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in other words, so a real practical example, Elizabeth, let's say one of the members now decides to continue keeping staff on a temporary layoff between middle of August and let's say end of September, October. But then for some reason, some people might become redundant, because I always talk about kicking the can down the road. There's a time period for how long do we keep somebody on a temporary layoff. On that note, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act nor the Labour Relations Act regulates that. So the employer has a right to put someone on a temporary layoff for however long. We've got one example of case law where an employer kept somebody on a temporary layoff for a year, and it was referred to the CCMA, and the employer won the case, because you can't be forced to retrench. So if I can just quickly divulge a bit more information there. So if an employee says to you as the employer, I don't want to sit on a temporary layoff until December. I've had 20 years service, rather retrench me. You as the employer have every right to say, I don't want to retrench you, and I cannot retrench you, because we will reach level 1. At some point, our travel industry will go back to normal, and I need you. So I'm not going to retrench you. So you've got every right to dig your heels in and say, I'm not going to be forced to retrench staff. I'm going to keep them on a temporary layoff until the end of the year. And if the person doesn't have enough credits, it doesn't mean that you are now obliged to retrench them. You can keep them on a reduced work time or temporary layoff as long as you need. What is unfair, though, is if you know for a fact, when I talk about kicking the can down the road, if you know for a fact that that position is redundant, and you know for a fact that even if we reach level 1, you're still not going to need certain people in your business, then I think it's a bit cruel not to start the retrenchment process now. But to go back to my earlier point, if somebody is claiming UIF for being on a temporary layoff or on reduced work time from the middle of August, let's say until September, October, if you then make them redundant, they should still be entitled to claim retrenchment benefits, but it's going to depend on the pot of credits. So if somebody has used up 4 months of UIF credits because they're on reduced work time or temporary layoff, then they get made redundant. There's not a different pot of credits. It's the same pot. So that same pot for maternity, for retrenchment, for your reduced work time, for temporary layoff, and reduced income. You know, you might have people volunteering to work, but they're earning less money because the business can't afford to pay them, or they are working, but they're just earning a lower salary. So any loss of income, the same eligibility reasons that we use for TERS can be used for UIF. But I keep reiterating, we cannot guarantee how long they can claim. UIF says up to a year, but it depends on UIF credit. So that's probably the most important thing to tell your staff from after August.
So I have many questions, but my first question is, so we know that a lot of guys are going, okay, well, once we switch over to UIF and there's this uncertainty over how much you are going to get from UIF, might want to top up, you know, whatever the employee was going to get. So let's say you want to top it up to a certain point. Is that possible, and how do you go about that? Has been some of the questions that we've had.
Okay. So if I heard correctly, you're saying if an employer wants to top up the difference between what they'll probably get. Okay, so is that correct, Elizabeth?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So the same would apply as during TERS time. You know, there were companies that were saying, I'll pay X amount because I need you to work a couple of hours a day or a few hours a week, in addition to the TERS. So as long as the employee doesn't profiteer, they can't earn more money or a higher salary with the combination of what the company is paying them and what they're receiving from TERS. So the same will apply with UIF. If you've got somebody earning $15,000 a month and you know that the maximum they're going to get is 6,730, and you want to top up the difference, you can either top it up as a loan, and we've got companies saying we'll allow people to pay it off, you know, over a year, pay off the loan. You could also use leave if you really wanted to. You know, we don't encourage it. We're saying rather let people apply for UIF and apply for TERS, and the company top up if they can. But if the employee says, I think one of the members' questions was, you know, if I don't want my leave, I don't care about my leave, I rather need money right now, then there's nothing precluding you from agreeing with the employee that they can take X amount of days leave every month as part of the top up. So the top up could be paying you some money to work, then we're applying for TERS, and then we're applying for UIF after middle of August. Plus, you're taking 2 or 3 days of leave every month until this is all
paid
done.
leave.
3 different amounts of income, or it could be just UIF or TERS, or it could be UIF or TERS plus leave, or it could be UIF and TERS, after August, plus UIF, plus company top up, plus maybe an advance, plus possibly leave. So you can have a whole culmination of, as long as the employee doesn't profiteer and earn more salary, then that's the only explanation.
Okay, so I mean, we have one question. We have one question here that I think touches on something that you've just said. So it's hi, I have received feedback from TERS with the following reason for non-payment for all staff, and it then says salary received during shutdown period is more or equal to normal salary. So what happened there?
Okay. So what happened there? I think in the beginning, when companies applied for TERS, companies were declaring, let's say, the leave value. So if somebody took 20 days of leave in the month of April and you declared 20 days of leave, remember UIF works on a calculator and there's a formula. So Suzanne, if I remember correctly, I think it was maximum 221 Rand a day or something like that, I think is the formula. So if the employees leave or reduce work time or the company top up was more than the UIF benefits, then they would not get the 6730 or not even get the 35. So we had examples like that in the lockdown period where companies were trying to be generous and showing the leave or showing the amount, but the amount exceeds the formula, then the employee would get zero amount. So that's why we encourage during the lockdown period to actually tell companies rather advance people. Don't pay people, advance them if they are not working. In other words, out of the goodness of your heart, you want to pay people while they're waiting for the TERS, but don't declare it as income. It's actually an advance because it's true. When the money comes from the TERS, then the employer has the right to offset the money that they receive from TERS against the advance. So obviously a company can't profiteer. A company can't hold the money from TERS and not pay to the employee. But if you, out of the goodness of your heart, dug into your pocket, paid your staff in advance, then you can offset the TERS payment. So that's probably what happened, because we actually saw quite a lot of articles. Even SAICA, the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, also put out a communication during the lockdown saying it's actually unfair. The companies that were doing the best they could for employees were being compromised because they were showing income, saying I'm paying the top up of 3,000 Rand, and then they would receive less benefit from TERS than a company who declared zero income. And we even had companies receiving the full amount and then they were told, well, you must sort it out. You must go and do your own recon and pay back the money to TERS if you've received an overpay. Okay. But we do have a formula, we have a calculator that one of our associates have put together, which is pretty accurate. She's actually used that formula based on how companies have been paid. So Suzanne, we could perhaps share that calculator as well.
Yes. That would be great.
For the members to say, well, use that. That's our calculator. It didn't come from the department, but that will show you not to declare too much income, rather show it as an advance, and like I said, offset it against.
But now, I mean, now the question is, now this has happened to this member, right? So how can you undo it?
Well, I think what I would do, or what I would suggest, is also that I have heard this before, that they then also unfortunately have to go the email route, but to explain this via email. Because remember, I think where the confusion came in is initially on the application where you need to declare the income, they called that column leave income, which was a very confusing term. Currently, I think they've changed it to income received during the shutdown period, which makes more sense. And then obviously also remember that when the directive changed, which said that they want to obviously cover leave. So leave isn't something that must go into any sort of declared income. But I think the only way would be to send an email, unfortunately, to explain this. There's not going to be a quick fix.
Quick workaround.
Yeah.
Okay. So then if we go back to UI...
Sorry,
go for it, Fatima.
About the pay slips as well, I'm probably confusing the members about the advance and offsetting, because remember, you need to show that you've paid the employees. So the idea is to, on the left-hand side of the pay slip, show an advance for, let's use the month of July now. So if some employers are capable of showing or giving staff an advance, calling it an advance, And then when the COVID TERS money comes into the company, is then showed on the left-hand side of the payslip. Show it as a COVID-19 TERS. Sorry, that's my mom bringing me tea. Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Showed on the left-hand side as COVID-19 TERS benefit. On the left-hand side, the payslip will still be the advance. And then on the right-hand side will be the advance again that you're deducting. So you at least can prove that you are paying people.
Yes.
Because if you're being audited, they want to see that you pay your staff. So it's always best to declare it. And we've even got the correct codes, the payroll codes to use. Because remember, it's going to show on the RP5s as well. So we can also share that with you.
Yeah, but just to recap, it's better to show it as an advance, because otherwise it shows up as income, and then you might get that message to say that the income now exceeds what they would normally have been paid. So just to recap for everybody, if you are topping up or giving people payment making payment while people wait for the TERS income to come through, don't just indicate that as a normal salary, indicate that as an advance, so that because otherwise you're going to run into this trouble that this particular member's question related to, where TERS is going to say, well, actually this person has now earned more than they would normally have earned. So I think that's very important.
Yeah. But if you are paying income, so obviously if you are paying for reduced work time, or somebody is really taking leave, remember on the left-hand side of the payslip, you're not going to show leave paid out, because then the person pays what we call bonus tax on leave paid out.
Yes.
So when people are on leave, it's normal salary. Then you'd actually just show it as something like basic salary, 3,000 rand.
You'll show it as time worked, even though the person is on leave, because it's paid leave. Yeah. But don't show it as leave paid out like you would do, when you reach an agreement.
Yeah, because then they pay more tax on leave paid out. I call it bonus tax.
Okay. So if we move back just to post-TERS, if we're back to normal UIF claims, if I can put it like that, there have been a lot of questions around how you claim for normal UIF once TERS is finished. I think, if I read that media statement by the Department of Labour correctly, I suspect one of the reasons why they extended TERS is because they haven't figured out how to process these massive volumes of claims, and it looks like there's going to be an online, they're going to extend their online capacity. There have been very confusing reports, in the last couple of weeks, as you know, around staff having to go in queue in order to make their UIF claims. So maybe if you can just talk briefly about how the normal UIF claims are going to work as best you can. I realize that it's a bit of a moving target at the moment.
Perhaps I can jump in here a little bit, Fatima.
I think before you start, I think just a quick one, and that is, please don't encourage staff to run down to the nearest Department of Labour and go and queue there. That's definitely not the plan. But Suzanne can explain the dilemmas at the moment with the U-filing system, and that is probably why we are all so relieved that the timing of TERS being extended is so perfect, because if we would have been telling your members today that we don't know. U-filing is still a mess at the moment. There's no clear indication. But let's Suzanne carry on.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I saw quite a few questions that the members asked that related to applying for reduced work time whilst they still are waiting for their TERS claims to come through, or the TERS payments to come through. So this is a very crucial question. Unfortunately, and it might not be that logical, but unfortunately it's true. So if you are still in the process of your TERS application and waiting for payment or processing or whatever the case may be, and you want to start applying for reduced work time, say for August or going forward, yesterday it was still July, it is indeed true that UIF is not going to approve your claim then. So how it works is they link claims to ID numbers. So one would have hoped that they look at the period so that they see, well, the TERS period is different to the reduced work time period, but they don't. They link it to ID numbers. So what they will see is they will see that there is currently a claim in process for an individual on the TERS platform, and therefore they will not continue with your reduced work time claim. So on a practical level, what I would do if I were you, I like that sentence, is I would first go for TERS, finish your TERS claims. Let's use that until the middle of August. I'm hoping that they're going to extend to the end of August because that would make more sense. First, finish the TERS claims, get your payment, and then move on to the normal UIF. I obviously understand that this is very frustrating because payments are very late. So you won't necessarily get your August, well, you won't get your August TERS in August. But unfortunately, this is the reality, and I don't want people to get to a point where they get rejected, or maybe the TERS claim gets rejected because there's a conflict between the applications. In terms of U-filing, there was also a lot of questions with regards to that. U-filing is experiencing technical problems. I also don't think they could foresee what will happen and that there's going to be this magnitude of questions and applications, etc., etc. So I'm hoping that during this extended TERS period, they will sort that out. And like Elizabeth mentioned, there might be an app, etc. But what employers perhaps can do in the meantime, just to save time, is to go ahead and register their company on U-filing and register their employees under their company. So that when we can apply for U-filing and all of that is sorted out, at least your people are already on the system. So there was also then questions with regards to who applies. It is an individual application and people can apply as an individual. They don't have to apply through the company, but the company can assist with the individual application. So very often employees don't have access to proper internet, etc., so that the employer can assist them, but it remains an individual application, so the money would go into the individual's bank account.
Okay. So,
can I jump in?
Yes, please.
Just to repeat a very pertinent point there, you know, I still don't understand why UIF can't see that it's different periods. So what is going to be a huge dilemma here is, like, let's say now your members apply for TERS up until 15th of August. And if by September you still haven't received the TERS payment, your poor staff are now saying, well, what about from 16th of August onwards? So what Suzanne is saying is, until we receive anything, any other advice, is don't then be tempted to go onto U-filing on the 16th of August and go and register for reduced work time, because your staff would not have probably received their payment up until the 15th of August. So this is going to be such a delay. So let's say your staff only get paid in September. Now you can only go and register from the 15th of August by the sounds of it, because they can't see that it's different periods. You know, why can't they work on a calendar and say, right, TERS went up until 15 August. UIF or U-filing, let's register the claim 16th of August. And because those of you that hopefully choose the selection that TERS gets paid into the company account, don't choose the option where TERS gets paid to the employee, because then you're never going to know when they got their payment, in order for you to help them apply from the 16th of August. So it is a mess. Rather let the TERS come to the company once, because then you'll receive confirmation when the TERS is finished. Then you go and help your employees with the U-filing. I really hope that they sort out the system, and it doesn't look like you'll be able to do a bulk upload. So those of you that have got a lot of employees, it's going to be a massive manual process. So I'm also hoping that before the middle of August that they've actually geared themselves up to filing ready, like TERS was a lot easier. Okay.
So we're getting quite a few questions around commission. So a lot of agents work on commission. My understanding, which I hope is incorrect, but I can see from Suzanne's face that I'm probably right, is if you have been earning on a commission basis that you don't qualify for TERS or for UIF.
Correct.
That's terrible.
That is terrible. Yeah.
I've read a lot of media reports overseas, you know, where the crisis has actually changed that viewpoint, that people who work, you know, in the gig economy, for instance, should be able to claim for unemployment. But so for the time being, that is just a flat no.
Yeah.
UIF and TERS is not going to help you.
We have. I have had a client, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't know whether it's applicable in some of the members' cases, but I do have a client where they work on commission basis, but the people work permanently for that employer on commission. And what they then did is they restructured the package slightly to make a portion of that into basic salary.
Basic,
so
yeah.
The people say always earn above 20,000, so they could just make a portion of it basic and then pay UIF on that, and then people can claim.
I suspect that this is going to be one of the lessons learned from this pandemic, is to change the way in which your salary is structured so that your employees have the benefit of, you know.
But the thing is, they haven't been contributing UIF. You can only make it effective now, 1st of July.
Yeah.
The problem, because you won't be able to claim.
Yeah, so can I help you now? No.
Not retrospectively, no, but going forward, it will definitely, I agree with that suggestion. I've also made that suggestion, is then rather restructure, make a basic, even if the basic is low, you know, even if it's a tiny basic, at least pay UIF on something going forward.
We were lucky because they made that decision in March, yes. So they could at least apply for TERS. They won't have enough credits for normal UIF, but yeah.
And that's a good point, Suzanne. I mean, if somebody only now joins a business in let's say June, July, and they've only been paying UIF now and they've never worked before, remember, those employees are not going to be able to claim. It's literally 1 day for every 4 days worked. So they're not going to have anything by the time August comes along, you know, in their little pots of UIF benefits.
Okay, so I want to do one more sort of just general answer to a bunch of questions, and then I think we're going to just work through all of the questions top to bottom in the Q&A. So obviously, as you know, the sector is faced with a very long recovery. Even if we reach a level 1 in December, there's probably going to be a bit of lag, and so we're unlikely to see a very rapid return of the sales volumes that we had before the pandemic. So obviously for some employers, and you mentioned it earlier, I would like you to talk them through how they should be thinking about retrenchment. When is that appropriate versus keeping people on this extended temporary layoff? What are the things that they should keep in mind? You know, I know that a lot of people see this kind of as a solution, retrenchments as a solution to a cash flow problem, but I've seen it cause a cash flow problem more often than not. So if you can maybe just talk through sort of generally what your strategic thinking should be around redundancy or retrenching people, I think that will be helpful to a lot of the members.
Okay. So now I'm wearing an employer hat. So as an employer, if I was an employer and I had to strategically think about your business and say, well, if we reach December, or even if, like you said, Elizabeth, there might be a lag, but we know that all the staff need to be there. So in other words, we know the industry will come right, and it might be a lag, but we know we need the staff.
Fingers crossed.
I wouldn't retrench anybody. I would keep everybody on temporary layoffs or on reduced work time, or implement salary reductions and the above. In other words, you could have a combination of everyone taking a salary drop, everyone being on reduced work time, or pockets of people being on reduced work time, pockets of people being on temporary layoff, all depending on the category and nature of their jobs. But I wouldn't go into retrenchment mode, and I'm saying I'm wearing the employer hat because it sounds cruel and it sounds unreasonable. But you as the employers need to remember that in our law, for a period of 12 months after you've made someone redundant, you are obliged to reach out to them when a suitable vacancy arises in your business. So it makes no financial sense as an employer to go and pay people severance packages, which is the minimum as per Section 41 of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. The minimum statutory amount is 1 week for every year worked. So use an example where you might have somebody that's got 20 years service, and you're feeling sorry for them because December feels like a long way away, and this poor person might not have enough credits because they were on maternity leave, 2 months ago or before the lockdown, and you're feeling that they've got no income. So it kind of feels that you're compelled to retrench them and give them 20 weeks of severance pay. The notice month also needs to be paid, and that's a bit of a gray area, because as an employer, you could say, but this is unfair. The person being made redundant is getting paid a month of notice, but the rest of the colleagues who are on reduced work time or temporary leave are not getting income. So it feels kind of unfair that the person being retrenched is getting a month's salary or whatever the notice period is, plus the severance pay of the 1 week for every year worked. And then you as the employer are going to also be done in, because let's say January, February comes and now you need to fill that position. You have to give that person that you've made redundant first right of refusal, which means you've got to reach out to them, even if it's in March, April, May, June, July next year, and reach out to them and say, we now have a vacancy for which you meet the inherent requirements. Would you like to be considered, even if they're working somewhere else, which now means you can't ask them to pay back the severance pay. So, their service starts all over again, but you as the poor employer have incurred this huge cost. And even if the job is not exactly the same, so don't think this is an ideal opportunity to get to exit your fraught apples. It's not a good strategy, because if somebody can argue that they could reasonably accommodate or reasonably fill that new position, our law requires employers to apply reasonable accommodation. So in other words, there's a position going, and I'm not perfect. I'm 70%, I'm meet the inherent criteria, let's say by 60 or 70%. I would argue and take you to the CCMA and say, you need to apply reasonable accommodation. You need to allow me to grow into that role. You can't just go and employ someone from the outside. So the poor employer is not able to just exit, let's say, use this opportunity to exit bad apples. And unfortunately, there are people getting wrong advice. I just have a client a month ago that told me that they were told they cannot put people on temporary layoff forever. And it's a Joburg company. They were pressurized into retrenching people. They paid over 2 million rand of severance packages. And now I come and told them that was a stupid thing to do, because you're going to have to re-employ all these people when your industry starts being back to normal again. And now you've unnecessarily paid 2 million rand out of severance packages, because they were wrongly advised that you cannot put people until doomsday. There are two bargaining councils, which is the Building Industry Bargaining Council, and I forget the other one, which regulates temporary layoffs. It's an electrical one. None of your members fall under those bargaining councils. So those bargaining councils regulate temporary layoffs. You can only be on a temporary layoff for 20 days, and then you have to be given the chance to be retreated. Your members are not regulated by those bargaining councils. So, and I've checked this fact. There is nothing in South Africa that prohibits you from having people on a temporary layoff, until doomsday. I suppose we can have a lot of case law coming our way in time to come, but I've got one example, like I told you earlier on, where a company put someone on temporary layoff for a year. So there's going to have to be a test of reasonability. I think putting someone on a temporary layoff for 2 years is pushing it. But if your members generally have to put people on a temporary layoff until December or January and then revisit, I think that would be fair and plausible. So my advice, don't retrench. Put people on a temporary layoff or reduce work time, or a combination of those two, and salary reductions. However, if it is a job that you know for a fact you're not going to need, even if the industry boomerangs in January, that's what I call kicking the can down the road. Then it would be fair to have pockets of people possibly being made redundant, whilst others are on reduced work time and temporary layoff. So that was a long explanation, but I hope I made the point.
No, it's perfect. I do have a question though. I think for some of our members, unfortunately, the prospect of their business not surviving is becoming quite real. So is there a point at which you decide, well, I don't think, let's say we anticipate that the industry is going to bounce in December, January, but let's say you realize now that you're probably not going to make it until that point. Is there a point at which you then decide, okay, now I should retrench rather? Can you make that decision too late is actually what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, I think you must remember that in the event that a company goes into liquidation, it doesn't mean that they're not obliged to pay the employees and retrench them. So even if a company goes into liquidation, even if a company says, I don't have money to pay my employees, those employees would still have the right to approach the CCMA. And if it's more than one employee being made redundant, the CCMA don't have jurisdiction to handle such matters. It then gets referred to the labor court, which becomes a very expensive exercise. And I can tell you now, those of you that have perhaps know more about liquidation, is that the employees stand in the front of the queue and then the rest of the creditors. So even if a company goes into liquidation, the employees are still entitled. They might get 30 cents to every rand owed to them, but they are still going to be entitled. So Elizabeth, your point about being too late, if it's large-scale retrenchments, I covered that on the last webinar, that where companies have what we call large-scale retrenchments, they have to then comply with Section 189A of the Labour Relations Act, which makes provision for 60 days of consultation before you can retrench. So Elizabeth, that was a very good point of yours. If a company knows that it's inevitable that they're going to close down or need to retrench, and you need to budget for it, then remember you've got 60 days of consultation if you fall under the criteria. And you can go and read the criteria under Section 189A of the Labour Relations Act, or we can share it with you. It depends on the size of the business. It depends on the number of people you are contemplating making redundant now, in addition to those you have made redundant in the last 12 months. You've got to add those two numbers together.
Okay.
And it means that you might fall under 189A. And it starts with companies that have over 50 staff. So you might say, but we're a small company. But if you're over 50 staff and you're retrenching 10 people, you might already be under 189A. So to make provision for that, you've got to put your stick in the sand and work backwards from that and say, well, worst case scenario, do we have enough money to hold out until December? And do we have enough money to be able to pay out severance pay and notice pay? So that's your strategic decision. My concern, wearing the employer hat, is that I'm worried that people get misinformed and told that you have to retrench because the staff don't have any more, they don't have leave, they don't have UIF credits, and now they're sitting without income. Is it fair? So if I wear my employee hat, the employee might argue and say, but that's unfair. I can't claim UIF. I've got no more leave. I'm going to be without income, and I can't go get another job because I'm still working for you and I have to resign. That would be unfair from an employee perspective. But the employer could argue saying, but I don't want to make you redundant. I don't have the money to make you redundant now. And also, more importantly, we need you. But you could rather than allow people to try and supplement their income and get other work, as long as it doesn't conflict with your business, or not in violation of a restraint of trade or any other. You've got to, but also be reasonable in allowing people to earn extra income.
Yeah. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the list of questions that we received before the webinar. So, because first come, first serve. So I'm just going to make sure that we have answered all of the more specific questions. So guys, we're going to jump around a bit now. So just keep in mind, there's stuff that applies to TERS, which has now been extended to the 15th of August. And then there's stuff that's going to apply post-TERS. So then we're going to talk about the UIF stuff. So we've gotten quite a few questions about leave. I'm just going to read this one. This is from one of the pre-submitted questions. So this was before we knew that TERS would be extended, but it says, what happens with annual leave accrual while staff are on either short-time or temporary layoff? Our contracts speak of leave accumulated in a 12-month cycle, but does mention 12 consecutive uninterrupted months. So I guess the question, if I had to paraphrase it, is if a person's on temporary layoff, what happens does annual leave still accrue, or is that an interruption in their employment?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. Hats off to that person for asking that question, because the same question is actually also about sick leave. Does someone accrue sick leave whilst on a temporary layoff? And are they entitled to paid sick leave on a temporary layoff? I want to add that question to that question, but let's first deal with the annual leave. Yeah, so that's a brilliant one. You are correct. Most companies who have permanent employment contracts will refer to 15 workdays per year, or if you're a kind employer, you might offer more than the statutory minimum. Or of course, if people work a 6-day week, they might be on a minimum of 18 days. And you're correct, most contracts of employment won't specify that it's 1 day for every 17 days worked. And most contracts will not make provision for periods of short time or reduced work time or temporary lapse, because we've never had to do that in contracts in the past.
No.
The employee will argue and say, my contract says I get 15 days per year, which means I'm entitled to leave during periods of short time or reduced work time or temporary layoff. And that's why it's a brilliant question. And my advice to you, and I've done this with all other clients, is when we put people on reduced work time or on temporary layoff, we say to them, just like a fixed term contract employee, your leave will be accrued on the basis of 1 day for every 17 days worked while you're on reduced work time. It's equivalent to the same thing of 15 days a year. 1 day for every 17 days worked, or 1 hour for every 17 hours worked. Thank
Okay.
having to work with that kind of numbers. Or if people are on a temporary layoff, then in your letter, in your correspondence to them, you need to remind them that annual leave and sick leave does not accrue, or at least they're not allowed to take paid sick leave, and they're not going to be accruing annual leave during periods of temporary layoff. And Suzanne, we can share the letters to the members of examples of reduced work time and temporary layoff, especially because in the beginning of lockdown, we had different letters. Now that lockdown, and people are having to be on extended periods of temporary layoff and extended periods of reduced work time. It's better to put it in that letter, Elizabeth, because if someone's going to challenge it later on, I'm at the moment dealing with somebody challenging a leave balance and of something that happened 3 years ago. So it's better to do it now and say, there it is in writing. We told you during the temporary layoff that you were not accruing leave.
So I mean, it's basically an extension of the no work, no pay principle. So no work, no leave, right?
Yeah,
that's what we're saying.
Yeah, and I must quickly share with you another story. I recently had a case now where somebody's worked for a company for 10 years, had to have a hysterectomy during the lockdown, and she was obviously booked off for 6 weeks, I think, something to that effect, and she applied for paid sick leave, and she had enough sick leave. So all of us would probably think, but that's fair. She's entitled to 6 weeks paid sick leave because she's got the leave, sick leave, and it's not her fault that her hysterectomy happened to fall into a period of the lockdown and she was on a temporary layoff. So my gut feeling would have said, yes, grant her the sick leave. But that's the wrong advice. The advice is actually, I had to research it. She is not entitled to paid sick leave during a temporary layoff because that's an unfair advantage, because the rest of the staff could say, that's lekker, I'm just going to run to my doctor and get booked off during my period of temporary layoff, so I can also get paid sick leave. So
just to repeat that, because I'm not sure I caught that correctly, right? So she worked for 10 years, and you would think that she
had 10 years of service. She had her full sick leave entitlement. Remember, the sick leave works on a 3-year cycle.
Yeah.
So if somebody works a 5-day week, they're entitled to 30 days of paid sick leave over a 3-year cycle. If somebody ordinarily works a 6-day week, then they're entitled to 36 days of sick leave, paid sick leave over a 3-year cycle. So this lady was on a temporary layoff. She was an office manager. The office was closed during from the shutdown. It's still closed. They still can't open up their offices, probably like a lot of your members. And the lady had a hysterectomy during the period of temporary layoff. So she applied for 6 weeks of paid sick leave because of the hysterectomy. So my first advice was, of course, pay her, give her 30 days. But then I went and researched it. And I had to go back to the client and say, actually, my advice was wrong. She's not entitled to paid sick leave because she's on a temporary layoff. So basically it would be unfair because it's no work, no pay, and like you said just now, no benefits, of annual leave or sick leave.
That's quite harsh, though. I mean, obviously, if an employer wants to be nicer than that, they can. But I think that's an important point. I probably would have given the incorrect advice as well.
Yeah, but then I said to them that I understand from a company point of view, if you give out the wrong message, then everybody else will say, well, then I'm going to go and also been booked off whilst I'm on a temporary layoff, and I'm going to get paid sick leave, and you, my colleague, are not going to get paid sick leave because you are being honest and not, not working. It feels terrible. Then I said, can't you postpone the hysterectomy to when the office opens again? But then and it would be stupid, but I'm just saying that is the correct advice. And I've checked that out with a few labor lawyers too, in terms of the interpretation of that. So it's important advice as well. But specifically, remember in your letters of temporary layoff and reduced work time to include the clause that leave will only be accrued on 1 day for every 17 days work. Clear it now, because if somebody disputes their annual leave balance, 3 years from now, CCMA have got no jurisdiction. It goes to the Department of Labor. You're going to have Departments of Labor coming to you and questioning why you didn't pay people's leave balance.
Or they get your ducks in a row.
Get it in a row now. I promise you, they have got the jurisdiction to make you go back to 3 years of reconciliation of leave. So rather have your ducks in a row, show your correspondent and say, we did tell the employees during the temporary layoff that they were not accruing annual leave.
So in keeping with the leave theme, and I know this is a discussion that we had during one of the previous webinars as well, there are questions around forcing employees to take their paid leave now. Do you just want to recap very briefly how to think about the issue of forcing employees to take paid leave?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. And I've got a real life example as well, where we had a company with 120 people that couldn't work during the lockdown, and they were all forced to take leave. And when I got wind of it, I said, but that's not fair. These people all earn under 17,719. They will all be entitled to TERS. Why are you forcing them to take their annual leave now when they actually should be taking annual leave during non-lockdown periods where they can enjoy being outdoors and not having to be homebound? So I said, reinstate the leave, give them back their leave, rather apply for TERS. If there's a shortfall, so let's say I earn a higher salary and TERS pays 6,730, but there's a shortfall, then let me take some of my leave if I so wish to. But it's absolutely a no-brainer. Why must I take all of my 15 days or 20 days leave, miss out on a TERS payment, and I've got no leave? And you know what happens with people that don't take annual leave? They get sick. So when everything's back to normal, you're going to have a massive abuse of sick leave, because people are going to start taking sick leave because they're not rested. So bad advice to force people to take annual leave. If I'm a higher earner, like I said, and I'm not going to get enough money from TERS, then I have a right to ask you as the employer and say, Elizabeth, I'm only getting 6,730. My salary is normally 15. May I take leave to supplement the shortfall if the company is not able to give me an advance that I can pay off, or give me a top up? Then it would be fair, but don't compel people. That's bad advice.
Okay, I'm just scanning through here. So a lot of questions about post-TERS. Obviously, just to recap, post-TERS, so let's say it ends on the 15th of August. Your employees will have rights to claim from the UIF. It will depend on how much credits they have left. So it's going to be less certain than TERS, certainly. A lot of you are asking questions about how to claim from UIF, or complaining about the fact that it's now going to be a lot of paperwork because these are individual claims. So just to recap what we know. What we know is that the UIF are working on the claims process. So I don't want to speculate about, how those are going to work. I think it's quite likely that it is going to change. But yes, there is this potential, and you need to prepare for it, that the paperwork is going to balloon. But we don't know what that's going to look like, and certainly there is still hope that they are going to think of more practical ways to process these massive amounts of claims. Right, so I think that we've answered in some way, shape or form most of the questions that were posted beforehand. So I'm going to now just move to the open questions still on the chat. Right, so
Elizabeth,
that one
Can I just jump in? I saw also there's quite a few members who said that they're not getting response from the TERS email address at all. And I just want to confirm that, yes, that's true. So my strategy has just been at least get an email out so that you have proof that you've queried something. So in 3 months' time, when they say they've closed it or whatever the case may be, you can at least show and say, look, but I sent the email, I did request assistance and you didn't assist. So I know this is not really the answer that you were looking for, but all that you can do is email, and you can phone the helpline. Now, they are reacting quicker in the sense of answering the phone, but they are very often, unfortunately, not able to solve the problem. So I think that's the bad news, but I think get your question just in the system so it's there.
Yes. A couple of questions where, Suzanne, this is probably one for you as well, where they are getting the response that in April, the employee was paid TERS. In May, all of a sudden, the employee is not found. And then in June, there's a message that says payment sent to financial system. What does this mean, and what should this member do in order to resolve these issues? If you have an answer.
Yeah, so there are quite a few specific situations, therefore I think it would be great, guys, email me, because I think everyone's problem is maybe slightly different. The one thing I can tell you is that there is an error message that many people get where they say no employees found. So under the saved employee list, there's no one. That's the only message you get, and that's a very scary message to get. I empathize with that. However, what we've seen with all our clients is that in time, that status message changes to application in progress. So what we think is happening is that when people choose to upload a CSV file and not upload the staff members manually, I think the members will know what I mean, the CSV file lies in the back end until they start processing the application. So it's going to show no employees found until someone on the back end starts working on that particular company's application. So front end development, not great. But yeah, so the good news is that most of our clients have eventually been paid. But just to also, tell you, it definitely takes longer. So some of our clients are waiting 3 to 4 weeks, really minimum of 2 weeks. So if you're still waiting, I almost want to say just wait a little longer.
Here's an interesting one. But back to the issue of leave. So if an employee is going on maternity leave now, and I'm assuming the question doesn't say whether this employee is currently on short time or on temporary layoff, but what happens to maternity leave right now? Should this person, the question is, should we apply for TERS or for the maternity benefit under UIF?
Okay. Suzanne, you want me to answer?
Yeah, go for it. I'll add if necessary.
Yeah, look at, okay, if I was an employee, I would want to extend my maternity leave as long as possible, because as we know, the 4 months of maternity leave is going to come out of the employee's UIF pot. So if there's a good chance that this person is still going to have to be on a temporary layoff after the 4 months, to me, it would be a bit cruel to put them on maternity leave UIF benefits right now whilst TERS is available. So some of you might say, but I'm sort of implying fraud. I'm saying, no, I'm not. The poor person can't help it that their maternity leave happened to go inside at the same time with TERS. If there's a good chance that they, like I said, are going to be on a temporary layoff after this period, I would say there's no reason why some people take leave, before they need to go on maternity leave. So it's all about the timing. If this lady is on a temporary layoff already, and she's only due, and I say pop with all due respect, she's only due to pop on the 16th of August, and she was going to take a month's leave, I would say don't take a month's leave. You're still on a temporary layoff, we'll apply for TERS, preserve your poor maternity leave benefits. You've only got 4 months with your newborn baby. Let's put you on maternity leave from the 16th of August, because you're on a temporary layoff and you would have taken leave, because most ladies take a month, before they pop. So I would not force her to go on maternity leave now, and I would say waste a month of her 4 months now when it could coincide with TERS. So now I'm wearing the employee hat again. I think we need to be as kind as possible to our employees. Suffered enough.
No, for sure.
During this time, they've paid UIF for many years. Let them get the benefits if they can of TERS and then their maternity leave. That's how I would do it.
But just to be clear, I mean, there's no maternity benefit under TERS. So the benefit that this person would be applying for is if she's either on short time or on temporary layoff.
Yeah. So
all you're saying is don't change that status from temporary layoff to maternity leave. Keep her on a temporary layoff so she can benefit from TERS.
Because remember our law says that ladies need to go off on maternity leave 4 weeks before they give birth. So the lady might say, but I want to work right up till the last minute. And a lot of employers make provision for people working up until a week before they have their baby. So she could say, well, I'd love to work until the last minute and I'm being put on a temporary layoff. I don't want to be forced onto maternity leave now. I'd rather be on a temporary layoff until the baby comes and then apply. So Suzanne, would you agree with that? Or does it sound like I'm implicating fraud here?
No, I agree. And also just to reiterate, don't get that application in the system, because then you're going to have a problem with the TERS payout. We do have clients where people are declined, and then the reason is that there's already a claim in the system, and that's usually a maternity leave claim.
Yeah. Just on that.
So does that sorry, I thought of it earlier. So the issue that we're talking about is this issue of you've got an open TERS claim, you haven't been paid yet. Now you want to start applying for UIF. Let's say it's the 1st of August and you want to start getting your applications in for UIF because TERS is going to end. What we're saying is you can't have both an open application on TERS and make a UIF claim.
Yeah.
Can you not resolve that by also uploading a letter to where you would normally upload the proof of payment, or does that not resolve that particular issue?
It's the application is two separate processes, and the only thing that links the processes is an ID number. So what is going to happen is either TERS or UIF is going to reject you, and then to fix that problem, I think is going to be extremely difficult, because you're going to have to phone someone or email someone, and we already know how that goes. So yes, it doesn't make sense because it's different periods, and it's sad in that sense, but it is what we're seeing. So we can't ignore it. Yeah.
Well, let's hope they fix that, you know, now with the e-filing, because it's absolutely, it just means people are going to get so delayed with their payments. But just another error message, I just want to share this one. We had a case recently where somebody also was rejected with the TERS, and it said that the employee also has an active claim. And when we looked into it, this person had claimed UIF for maternity benefits 5 years ago. She didn't even get UIF 5 years ago for some reason. And the claim was still sitting as open. So we had to close that maternity claim before she could get TERS. So there's going to be cases like that too, where somebody might have, you know, been on maternity leave a year ago and it's still an open claim for some odd reason.
So this is a bit of a
contact at the Department of Labor that can fix and clean it up.
This is a bit of a technical question, but I see we've got 4 or 5 of the same ones where people are saying they're trying to register for U-filing, or they have already registered for U-filing, but their account is blocked and resetting the password doesn't work. Who do you approach to help you with profile issues like that? Either you can't register or you can't get your password reset.
Yeah, we've had those. Suzanne, do you want to give that one?
So in terms of U-filing, unfortunately, it also is a case of contacting the technical department at U-filing and hoping that someone can assist you. I haven't yet come across a easy way, but the moment I find something, or the moment I hear something, I will definitely immediately notify Natalia everything, everything that all the new stuff we share. So if there's any new tricks of the trade in terms of solving that issue, we will definitely let you know. But at the moment, the struggle is real.
Okay, so here's one that I think I unfortunately know the answer. It's not a good one, and I just want to make sure that I'm correct. So the question reads: if you are self-employed and you work on commission only, and you are not registered for UIF, can you still register and apply for TERS?
Well, you're showing your head, but if the person registers now, let's say restructures their packages for the previous answer, you know, they restructure their package and say from 1st of July, they're now going on to a basic salary plus commission, and then they're only going to be starting to pay UIF from July. They should be able to claim for TERS for 1 month, but they're not going to have any credits in the UIF part if this person's been self-employed for the last 4 years.
Elizabeth, I'm just going to jump in here. In terms of TERS, I think that the date was 16th of March. If you haven't registered for UIF by the 16th of March, then you can't apply for TERS. So there was a cutoff. The date in March, I can double check quickly while you talk. But yeah, if you only register after that, you won't be able to apply for TERS.
But Suzanne, we've had cases where people got employed. You know, like if somebody had to start at a company the 1st of April or the 1st of May, they'd already resigned from their previous company, and they've now registered, you know, obviously with a new company. So we've told the new company register them, because they would have been registered in the system somewhere along, but with their previous employer. In this case, if the person's self-employed, but they might have been on the system 4 years ago before they started their own, you know, travel business, they might still have paid for 4 years and then had a gap for a while, and now they're on the system again. So, you know, it's worth it.
The problem lies with the company being registered.
Oh, okay.
The company not having a UIF number that is older than
that's
March.
Okay.
But that's true. But this particular member, if that member has employees in her business or his business that they are paying, but when you say self-employed, it could be a person that has as you said, now hasn't registered themselves, but might have other people. So we'd have to just look and see a bit more about that one. But it's worth applying. But yeah, Suzanne's right. If the company is not registered before the 16th of March, that's going to be a no-no.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we've got time for one more question, but before we get to that one more question, I do want to say to people there are still quite a number of open questions. So what we usually do after these webinars is we take all of these questions and we create an FAQ. So we will do that again. So for those of you who are feeling anxious because I haven't answered your specific question, we will follow up on these questions. The last question that I want to get to, because a lot of our members are what are called ITCs, so this is typically travel agents that are self-employed, just like the question that we just had. The question is, as an ITC, do you have to retrench yourself and claim UIF after mid-August, or do you just show UIF that you have no income when you apply? Now, this is an interesting one, right? So this person is self-employed. I'm assuming that they have been paying themselves a salary, right? So do they need to retrench themselves in order to be eligible for UIF post 15 August? Or what is the position there?
Well, if the person, is an independent, like the previous question, and they're not registered for UIF, and the business is not registered for UIF, and employees that are, people that are independent contractors, even if the person that you're talking about now has other ITCs working for them, and they're not registered for UIF, they're not employees. So contractors don't get retrenched. Somebody who might have an independent contract agreement with any of your members would basically be told, as per the provisions of the independent contract agreement, we need to just give you a month's notice. They, in the eyes of the law, do not have employee rights. They're not entitled to annual leave, sick leave, public holiday pay, retrenchment benefits, because an independent contractor needs to make provision for all of that in the fee that they charge. So if it's a self-employed person who's not registered for UIF, the company's not registered for UIF, it's pointless making themselves redundant because they're not going to be able to claim.
No, exactly.
Yeah, so they're basically acting as a sole proprietor, probably registered with SARS as a provisional taxpayer. They're not an employee of their own business, so then they would just basically not have any UIF rights. Suzanne, do you agree?
What I'm explaining to people is if you haven't been contributing to UIF, you can't claim from the fund. Right. So that is the general rule of thumb. If you are in a position because you are self-employed or whatever the case may be, you've never contributed to UIF, then unfortunately the fund is not for you. Suzanne, do you agree with that summary?
Yeah, so that's the first question. If the answer is no, then sorry. And then the second question is, yes, you've been contributing and you've been paying SARS. And then the question is, did you declare on a monthly basis to the Department of Labor? If you haven't, you can luckily fix that. But yeah, so those are the two first questions, and nothing after that applies if you can't answer those two.
Yeah. Just another thing that's come to my mind now, if any of the members have fixed term contract employees, remember that's different to independent contractors. So independents are not an employee. But a subcontractor is not an employee, but an employee is somebody who renders their services on a part-time basis, could be a permanent part-time, could be a fixed term, could be a flexi. Those are all employees. And we often have cases where people are on long fixed term contracts. If they are in your business for longer than 2 years, remember legislation changed in January 15, which means after 2 years of service, if they're a fixed-term contractor, they are entitled to severance pay of 1 week for every year worked, but only after the first 2 years. So those people are entitled to severance pay and would be able to claim UIF, even though they're a fixed-term contractor. Because remember, fixed-term contractor will be paying UIF. So that just on a side note, just that, but those are the people that.
I mean, we're all going to be experts in employment law by the end of this. Right, I just want to, from my side, quickly thank Fatima and Suzanne again. Just to summarize, we will be answering the questions that we didn't get to. Suzanne has also kindly volunteered to help some of you with these baffling error messages that you've been getting. I'm going to leave it to Natalia to close off the meeting for us, but just from my side, thank you very much for your time and for your help since the start of this all through. It's been really of great comfort, I think, to all of us that we had people to ask these questions of. But yeah, Nats, do you want to close us off?
Sure, don't have much to say other than thanks to Fatima and Suzanne for always being so willing to lean in and help us with all those really complicated questions. And many of them are specific questions that cannot be answered through generalities. But we will issue the FAQ as soon as possible. It's quite likely the recording will go out quickly, but the FAQ takes us a little bit of time to put together. My thanks to everyone who logged on today. Stay strong, stay safe. At least we have a little bit more of a runway through TERS. And yeah. See you on the next one. Oh, don't forget the summit, the travel summit. If you don't have information on it, just look out for your next newsletter and it will be in there. Cheers, guys. Have a good day.
Yes, bye.
Bye-bye. Good luck.
Bye.